Fighting is growing more gruesome as we enter month 2 of the Russia-Ukraine war. A disturbing video that began circulating on Sunday shows what appears to be members of the Ukrainian military beating Russian prisoners of war. Several captors were tied up, beaten, and it looks like shot in the legs.
This looks to be in direct violation of the Geneva Conventions that were signed after World War II, which mandate that even prisoners of war must be treated humanely, especially prisoners of war. This video of the alleged mistreatment is expected to be investigated by both Ukraine and Russian officials. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov added that the soldiers who were conducting the mistreatment would be held accountable.
As they should.
Yes, as they should. A top Ukrainian official responded by saying that all prisoners need to be treated with respect, but did not specifically reference, but it was clearly in reference to the emergence of this video. We're not playing it here, but it's very gruesome stuff.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's a reminder, don't ever get too caught up in some hero narrative about one side being good and one side being evil. Atrocities are committed by both sides in every war. And they shouldn't be, and this is horrible. And
we're entering into a period where everybody has iPhones or smartphones, and also has the capacity to pass video around in a way that really hasn't existed previously. You could say that we've seen this with Syria, but even since Syria, the kind of proliferation and development of camera phones has been significant, although there's still plenty of violence going on in Syria. But what you started seeing there were a trickle of videos of war crimes being committed by both sides, and then a flood of them, and then it becomes almost numbing after a while. But yes, war has always been like this. If you go back and read real accounts, from even like Napoleonic, or you go back even further and further, like just absolutely vicious, gruesome things being done to both sides.
Well, in the old days, after you had people, during Napoleonic era and before, everybody lines up, shoots at each other, charges at each other, and then there are a bunch of people like gruesomely dying on the battlefield who then get like mercifully finished off. Right? It's awful.
Right, and so. But the New York Times, confirmed that this was an authentic video because you always do have to wonder as snippets of video are emerging whether or not.
Yeah, snippets of video can be misleading. Video can inform us, but it can also mislead us. Think of all the times we've been tricked, not even in a war context, but by a quick video clip that seems to show one thing and then greater context makes it show something else. So always got to be very careful. Right. But the New York Times did confirm.
And you can hear the Ukrainian soldiers saying in Russian to the Russian soldiers, we're doing this because you've destroyed Kharkiv, and trying to figure out if there are Russian officers, and that's why it's so important to avoid wars.
Yeah,
because you're going to have revenge, and then revenge for the revenge, and revenge for the revenge, and these Russian soldiers were 18-year-old kids who got drafted, probably,
right,
and. A lot of them were told that they were going on a training exercise and didn't know that they were part of a war until they were in the war.
And even if you're not persuaded by the moral case against doing something like this, you should be persuaded by the moral case, but even if you're not, tactically it is not good to torture or harm prisoners of war, because you actually want the other side to surrender en masse. Right. You want them to stop fighting. And if it becomes understood that prisoners are not being treated well, that makes them fight. If they're going to face awful execution or torture, then they're going to fight till the bitter end. You don't want the other side to fight to the bitter end. You want giving up to look like a pretty appealing option.
Right.
There's actually in World War I. There was like mass surrendering of armies because the fighting in World War I was so miserable. The trench warfare. Blasting, reducing to ash everything. People living in these tunnels and these disease-ridden, dark, cramped tunnels. And horrible.
Typhus.
And it was such a stupid war and it wasn't a war for.
And they all had flu.
They all had the flu. It wasn't a war with this kind of state. Like there was not an evil Like, they didn't even feel that way about it, that there was some evil empire to defeat.
Right.
It was a minor territorial struggle. And so people would surrender. There was a lot of surrendering. And after you'd surrendered, they were actually treated pretty well in all sides of that war in most cases. It was not the case in World War II. In World War I, people were actually who had surrendered were treated well, as long as you could get to the surrender point. You had to make it across the battle lines. The chances of getting killed during the surrender phase were high, but
or right at the surrender phase.
If you were accepted as a prisoner, you were treated pretty well.
Yeah, but you're very right. In fact, Ukraine has been kind of putting out the idea that if you surrender, we'll
pay you.
We'll pay you.
Right? We heard Brian Kaplan's idea. Yeah, pay them to surrender.
And there was a story of they have been texting Russian soldiers because because the Russians are so far overextended, they don't have encrypted access anymore. The Ukrainian military has been texting all these Russian soldiers with instructions of how to surrender. And there's this crazy video of one Russian soldier who he was the only one left in his tank, and he made a deal. Like, I think he sold the tank to the Ukrainians for like $7,500, and got his freedom. Gave himself up. And they met him at a certain place and made sure that he laid down. It wasn't a trick, but it wasn't a trick. He actually sold them the tank. That's what you want.
You imagine them just going through the phone book. Hello, are you Anatoly Anastakovich? Would you like to surrender?
Yeah, go to 5th and Main, drop your tank off. They literally did that.
That's great.
Which is such a better approach than shooting people in the legs who are already bound.
Yeah.
Like already with their hands behind their backs bound, and you're going to shoot them. A
lot of anti-violence content on the show today. Don't do violence, kids.
I hope these Ukrainian soldiers are held accountable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they should be. They know who these people are. Their commanders can figure this out.
Yeah.
Make an example of them, and so that this doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Or it happens less. It's going to keep happening. Well, we'll have more Rising right after this.